Hi, so this is just a video demonstration for my Github Visualization project. I've coded it in JavaScript. It's cleaned up using bootstrap.js, and then I made the diagrams using chart.js. So let's call the API. This is Linus Torvalds Github account. So that was a successful request. You can see here we've got all its details. But you might notice that we have a list of his public repos but not his private ones. So in order to do that, we need an authentication token. I don't have access to Linus' account, but I can access my own personal account if I have my own token. So this is just my private account. And that's the token I've prepared in advance. So you can see here now we have a list of my public and private repos. In order to get the private repos, you have to specify that when creating the token, but also using the token, we're allowed to make way more requests to the Git API. So I've based this website on the measuring software engineering report we did earlier this year. I've taken two sort of naive and two more apt approaches to measuring software engineering. There's unfortunately very little I can do to replicate the more apt approaches, but I've worked with what I've got, and I think it gives an idea of what's possible and why it might be useful. So I start off with a pie chart of my most popular languages, Java being my most popular one by far. This really isn't very useful to measuring software engineering, but I suppose it's somewhat useful if you want to know if a prospective employee is going to be familiar with any of these languages. But something I noticed immediately is that 1/8 of the pie chart is Objective-C, and I've never actually coded in Objective-C before. I think that's just from a library, so you can see why this probably isn't useful for measuring software engineering. Next, we have a commits per repository. So this is a little bit more useful because you can see along this line here, I've made way more commits at this point in time than the time before. So it might be useful to ask an employee why they feel like they made more commits there. We can do this with any repository. So just load up my private repository for my microprocessor systems module. It's not a very useful graph because I've only made a few commits. Once again, more naive approach. So next we've got a more apt approach. I can't really replicate cycle time because you might create a repository 10 years ago and then only decide to work on it yesterday. So with what I've got, I've assumed that work started when the repository was created, and then work is completed when from the last commit. So I've only gone, I think, 300 commits back for each repository, because anything more than that would take forever to load pretty much. Then I get the time difference, and I divide it by the total number of repositories. So we get an average cycle time of 36 days. So that's definitely going to be influenced a little bit. So by my larger repositories that I have one repository that I'm committing to for at least a year and a half now. So the number should probably be much lower than that. This gives you an idea anyway of what's possible. Finally, I have this last graph, a scatter plot of commits per day. So it's just plotting every time I commit something to a repository, it plots the day and then the hour. So you can kind of get an idea of when I do my most frequent commits. The reason why this is empty is because it's first thing in the morning, so I'm not going to be programming. And then this space here is also empty because I'm at college and I'm working. But then I work late into the night usually when I'm programming, so more commits towards the end of the night, and then a lot more commits at midnight and whatnot because that's right before I go to bed. So yeah, this would be useful, I think, for an employer because you can kind of get an idea of when a software engineer is making their most commits. So then you can tell, oh, that's when they're most productive. So maybe there's a day where every Friday they have a meeting and then they've got no commits at that time. And then the time after the meeting, they've also got way less commits. So a manager might be able to say, oh, well, maybe that meeting isn't as useful as we think. Yeah, that's pretty much the entire project. But now let's just show you what happens if I request a invalid, like, I don't think that's a repository. I'll just get rid of the token as well. So invalid username or token. So if I actually do the token, yeah, nothing happens either. Yeah, that's the whole project, and thanks for watching.